Much brighter, much sunnier day compared to today. And for most places, it's a fine, bright day with lengthy spells of hazy sunshine. Not quite as warm as today, but still pleasant enough. Temperatures into the high teens, low 20s, maybe 24 across the southeast. Cooler around some coasts. And then we see the potential for further showers coming into the southwest initially, band of heavy rain moving into Northern Ireland, and then further south, the risk of some pretty lively looking storms drifting up from France. Maybe hit and miss affairs, but the potential for some very heavy downpours during Wednesday night into the early hours of Thursday. Again, you may get woken up by a flash of lightning or a rumble of thunder, but again, they scoot away pretty sharply. Some rain in Shetland on Thursday morning, but for most places during the day, it's another fine dry day with plenty of sunshine on Thursday. Again, some showers over the Highlands and the Western Isles. And again, temperatures responding to that sunshine, getting into the high teens or maybe into the low 20s. Bye for now.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey and here's what's coming up between now and 4 o'clock. A jam-packed programme. We'll be looking at what's happened in the House of Commons in the last hour or so, with Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, addressing Parliament, stating the government will put forward legislation in the next couple of weeks to try and sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol. We'll have the latest from Westminster and indeed from Northern Ireland. Also, the Bank of England's governor has warned that households across the country face an apocalyptic food price rise due to international circumstances and inflation. How can the government tackle this cost of living crisis? And we'll be in Ukraine, speaking to him, the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. We'll be talking to him about the conflict, the next steps for Ukrainian forces. And as always, we want to hear from you as well. Please do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at gbnews. That and so much more between now and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It's 3:02. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The European Union has warned it will respond with all measures at its disposal if the UK breaks the Northern Ireland Protocol. European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic says practical solutions to problems have been offered, but the UK has failed to meet them halfway. The Foreign Secretary has today set out plans to rewrite Britain's post-Brexit trading agreement, changing the rules on how goods enter Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. Liz Truss says the government is still open to negotiations and the new measures don't break international law.
This is not about scrapping the protocol. Our aim is to deliver on the protocol's objectives. We will cement those provisions which are working in the protocol, including the common travel area, the single electricity market and North-South cooperation, whilst fixing those elements that aren't, on the movement of goods, goods regulation, VAT, subsidy control and governance.
The Prime Minister says there are pragmatic solutions available to resolve the issues.
We can make some changes, I think, to the protocol, which is not the law of the Medes and the Persians. I agree. It's there in Article 13.8 that if things aren't working, you can change it. Plus, it makes it very clear on the face of the text that you should ensure the East-West trade and the integrity of the UK internal market. So let's fix it.
A man's been charged with multiple offences linked to the ongoing investigation into child abuse in Rotherham. Officers from the National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood confirmed that a 57-year-old's been charged with 17 offences related to the abuse of 4 teenage girls in the 1990s. He'll appear before Sheffield magistrates next month. The founder of a far-right terror group whose members plotted to carry out deadly attacks has been found guilty of involvement with the organisation. 27-year-old Alex Davies set up the group National Action 9 years ago and continued to associate with it and its offshoots after it was banned by the government in 2016. It follows 19 other convictions of those who continued their membership after the group was outlawed. Volunteer police officers are going to be given the power to use tasers under new Home Office plans. There are nearly 9,000 special constables in England and Wales, and they carry out the same duties as regular police officers. Amnesty International is calling the move dangerous, saying misuse of tasers can lead to harm and even death. But the Home Secretary says the measures will ensure volunteers are not at a disadvantage when facing knife attackers or terror threats.
We are absolutely making sure we do everything we can to equip and empower our officers, frontline officers. I made a taser announcement almost 2 years ago now for police officers, along with the money, resourcing and training. And now for specials in particular, the choice is of course down to chief constables, and I would urge those chief constables to work with us on the resourcing and the training for these special constables.
Finland's parliament has approved a proposal to apply for NATO membership. Sweden's also made a formal bid to apply to join the alliance. That's not yet been approved. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has prompted the Nordic states to re-evaluate their security. Both countries need each of NATO's 30 members to approve their applications. In Ukraine, the Deputy Prime Minister says the country's working on further stages of evacuating fighters from the steel plant in Mariupol. More than 260 servicemen have already been evacuated from the besieged Avastal steelworks. Some are injured and have been taken to hospital in a Russian-controlled town. All evacuees will be subject to an exchange. Well, Michael Ryan, who's worked in NATO policy, told GBNews it's likely Moscow's trying to show goodwill to improve their negotiating position.
I would expect that there will be a prisoner swap. The Ukrainians have a significant number of Russian prisoners. The Russians would not be able to argue away in the style of propaganda that they're used to what would happen to these soldiers if they're not brought back alive. And so I would definitely see a transactional prisoner swap.
The Queen has made a surprise appearance at London's Paddington Station, officially opening the now completed Elizabeth line that's, of course, been named in her honour. The 96-year-old monarch was joined by her youngest son, Prince Edward, who was due to board a train and head to Tottenham Court Road, becoming one of the first ever passengers. We can all take the line in a week's time when it opens to the public. This is GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the briefing and Darren.
Thank you very much indeed, Rosie. Great to see the Queen up and about here in Paddington today, unveiling that Elizabeth line. And we are going to start in many ways with that, because that is also where the Prime Minister was today. He was opening that new Elizabeth line at Paddington. It's due to open, I think, next Tuesday. But he was also quizzed about the big political story today, that is changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol and the prospect of Finland and NATO joining, Finland and Sweden joining NATO. Let's have a look at what the Prime Minister had to say when he was interviewed a little bit earlier.
Ask you a couple of questions about the Northern Ireland Protocol. We can't afford a trade war, can we, at a time like this? And that's looking increasingly likely if you go ahead with the legislation being proposed.
I don't think that is likely, but what we have to fix is the problems with the Northern Ireland political situation, where you can't get the executive up and running right now. In the past, we've done all sorts of things to fix that. We need to address the problems with the protocol. What that actually involves is getting rid of some relatively minor barriers to trade, and I think there are good, commonsensical, pragmatic solutions. We need to work with our EU friends to achieve it.
Despite your visit yesterday, you haven't convinced the DUP, have you?
I think that it's important that all political parties who believe in the government of Northern Ireland get back round the table and get Stormont up and running. Northern Ireland's got amazing opportunity now. Parts of the Northern Irish economy are going really, really well. What they need is leadership. They need their politicians to focus on the things that matter to the people of Northern Ireland.
The Governor of the Bank of England said yesterday he feels helpless. Do you feel helpless?
No, I think that this country has got a fantastic future. And if you look at just at what some of the data that we're seeing now, it's so unlike previous economic problems in the UK. Unemployment, which was, you're younger than me, but when we were kids, unemployment was the thing that was so devastating. In the 80s and the 90s, millions of people were on the scrap heap. You've now got unemployment at the lowest levels since 1974. Now, what we've got to do is make sure that we fix some, I think, short-term global inflation issues caused by coming out of the pandemic, particularly on supply chains, particularly on the cost of energy. But we have the fixes. We're putting in the energy supply, the British energy security strategy that we need. Plus, because of the strength of the UK economy coming out of COVID, we're going to continue to support people through the choppy period. But we will get through it in very good shape.
Just going back to the Northern Ireland Treaty, how can you justify breaking a treaty you signed?
I think the higher duty of the UK government is to, in international law, is to the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process, and that's the thing we have to really look to, and of necessity, we can make some changes, I think, to the protocol, which is not the law of the Medes and the Persians. I agree. It's there in Article 13.8 that if things aren't working, you can change it. Plus, it makes it very clear on the face of the text that you should ensure the east-west trade and the integrity of the UK internal market. So let's fix it. We don't want to nix it, we want to fix it, and we want to work with our EU partners to do it.
Final question on NATO, Sweden and Finland. If President Erdogan blocks it, what will you do?
I think that the case for Sweden and Finland coming in is very good. The Swedes and the Finns have made an absolutely historic decision, and I think that mature consideration by all friends and partners in NATO will invite everybody to conclude that this is the right way forward.
There you go, the Prime Minister speaking a little bit earlier on. By the way, you're watching GB News 11 minutes past 3 o'clock on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let's stay on what the Prime Minister was talking about there at the very start of that interview, and that, of course, was the Northern Ireland Protocol. We've heard from the Foreign Secretary in Parliament today, Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, with us in the studio. Tom, just give us a sense of what Liz Truss was announcing today to MPs.
Well, far from the reports that we were expecting at the end of last week that there'd be some sort of legislation today. Instead, there was an announcement that in the coming weeks there will be the start of that legislation journey, that journey towards some unilateral measures with regarding sorting out the Northern Ireland Protocol. The basic premise that the UK government has is establishing a green lane for goods traffic that going from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, but that will stay in Northern Ireland. And that'll be run through a trusted trader scheme. And that'll be exempt from those new checks that came in on goods going from GB to NI. But also a red lane for goods not in that trusted trader scheme, for goods that could go further on into the Republic of Ireland, into the EU's single market. And this is the compromise that the British government has come forward with, that it's prepared to enact unilaterally, that it says will protect the integrity of the EU single market, because there'll still be checks on goods going to that market, but will preserve the integrity of the East-West connection within the United Kingdom between GB and NI, ensuring there's a free flow of goods in the way there was before with regards to that. And the way they're going to try and sell it to the EU is heavy punishments for companies that break those rules, that try and exploit that system. This has been announced in parallel to continued negotiations as well. So the journey of this legislation will be set out over the coming weeks, and it may well not be actually going through until the end of the session, until right through into the summer. But that will happen in parallel with continued talks with Maros Sefcovic, the negotiator on behalf of the EU.
Isn't the idea of this in part also not just to sort out the protocol, but to try and see Parliament or the devolved administration restored instalments? But this is not going to happen anytime soon, is it? This legislation could take a while, could get blocked by the House of Lords, for example.
Certainly.
So there is no sense that this is going to mean the immediate restoration of instalments.
No, it's interesting. Liz Truss started her statement by saying how important the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is, how much the House of Commons and indeed everyone else wants to uphold it. That should be the primary duty. And how the Good Friday Agreement is threatened currently by the inaction of the executive, that non-formed executive, because the protocol has lost the consent of the unionist side of politics, but also the Foreign Secretary was keen to mention that every single party at Stormont has problems with the protocol. Every single party at Stormont would like to see some changes to the protocol. So this is the reasoning by which the government is taking this action to try and protect the Good Friday Agreement. Whether or not the European Union and the United States of America will see it like that is another question.
Well, they don't at the moment, it seems. Anyway, we got a statement, didn't we, from the EU essentially saying that they do not want to see this unilateral action. Could well be consequences. Could well be a trade war. I mean, there is Conservative MPs who are concerned about this, aren't they? They're concerned that in taking this unilateral action, we might get involved in a trade war. Still our closest trading partners, the European Union, at a time when we can frankly least afford it.
That's certainly true. Now, if you speak to various cabinet ministers, they'll have different answers. In some ways, Liz Truss in her statement today preempted that argument, saying everything in this legislation that will be put forward to the government is completely abiding by international law, that they're working within the terms of international law, that they don't want to scrap the protocol. They want to make the protocol work better, and using particularly Article 13(8) of the protocol, which allows for superseding agreements. This is the government's argument that they're not breaking any law. And by that argument, if that's upheld, if the EU were to bring trade measures against the UK, it would actually be the EU that is in breach of its international obligations, the EU that's in breach of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, and it's quite possible that then the United Kingdom would be able to take the EU to court, to the World Trade Organization, and potentially, if we believe everything the UK government says, which I'm not sure everyone does, but in that regard, the United Kingdom could be in the right and the EU the wrong.
Well, I'm sure the EU's lawyers are also on this and possibly making a different case. But Tom, as always, thank you very much indeed. Tom Hobbit, our political correspondent in the studio. Let's go to Northern Ireland, speak to a good friend of ours, a good friend of the programme, good friend of mine, Arlene Foster, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland. Arlene, thank you very much indeed for joining us. What did you make of what you heard from Liz Truss today?
Well, I think Tom's absolutely right, Darren, when he says, I think some of us were expecting legislation to be laid this week. Instead, we've had a statement from the Foreign Secretary saying that she is going to place legislation if there is no agreement with the European Union. I think it's probably a last-ditch attempt to say to the European Commission, we are going to put this legislation down unless you work with us to find solutions. And I suppose the frustrating thing for those of us who were involved in the Brexit negotiations after 2016 is that things that are being talked about now, Darren, such as trusted trader, such as a green channel, such as alternative arrangements, were all things that were put forward at the time, but were dismissed by the European Union as unicorn thinking. You may recall that phrase at the time. So that's the frustration, that we're now actually having to move to that situation. And of course, that should have been the situation all along. There was no need for an Irish sea border. These issues could have been dealt with using technology, using risk assessments, and it looks as if that's the direction of travel now for the government. I welcome that, and I look forward to seeing the legislation when it comes out so that we can then move forward and have power sharing again in Northern Ireland.
Do you think there's a sense, Arlene, that maybe the EU are willing to move on this? We've heard from Simon Coveney, haven't we, in the last couple of days, the Irish Foreign Minister, seeming to suggest, that there is a recognition that the protocol is not working as well as it could or should be. Do you think the EU might move to a position to compromise?
No, I don't, unfortunately, Darren, because we've been here now for 18 months. For 18 months, the government has been saying that there has been a problem. In July of last year, our government published a paper, a command paper, which set out our proposal. Sometimes I'm amused to hear European members saying that they don't know what the UK is looking for. It's there in black and white in the command paper in July of last year. David Frost brought that forward. Then since the Foreign Secretary has been in primacy for the negotiation, she has been trying to negotiate with the European Commission and isn't getting anywhere. And that was clear from her statement today, that she felt that there was no desire from the European Commission to move ahead. They haven't sought a renewed mandate because, of course, Maros Sefcovic, who is the negotiator on behalf of the European Commission, does so on behalf of all of the European states, and he is given a mandate by those states. And at present, there has been no change to that mandate. So they're not serious about looking for changes to deal with the damage that is happening in Northern Ireland. And it looks like the UK government, which of course is sovereign in Northern Ireland, is going to have to act. And I thought it was interesting that the Institute of Economic Affairs published a paper just yesterday saying that looking at the economic damage, looking at the societal damage, that they believe that the United Kingdom government has the right to act unilaterally under the terms of the protocol, which of course allows for that action if there's a diversion of trade and if there's societal and economic damage. So while some people are asking the question, how can you sign a treaty and then reject it? Actually, the protocol itself makes space for changes to the protocol, and that's very clear if anybody cares to read the very detailed protocol that's there.
And just very finally, and quickly, Arlene, if you can, what would you say to those within government and indeed some Conservative MPs who are worried that, at the end of the day, this could lead to a trade war with the EU at a time when we're hearing, of course, from the Bank of England and others about just how desperate things are for the British economy?
Well, I think that is a very important question. And when you look at the world trade, the WTO rules, it's very clear that you can only take proportionate action. And of course, if the EU takes proportionate action, they won't be taking any action at all because there's no risk to the single market. I think the Foreign Secretary has made that very clear, that her proposals will bring about protection of the Belfast Agreement and the single market. And that's done, as I say, through those various measures, trusted trader, green channels, alternative arrangements, using risk, using technology, which of course should have been the route that was adopted right from the start.
OK, Arlene, as always, thank you very much indeed. Arlene Foster there joining us from Northern Ireland. Thank you, Arlene. Let's talk to John Penrose. He's the Conservative MP for Weston-super-Mare and joins us down the line. John, thank you for joining us. As an element of a smooth transition from one subject to another, because they both feed into each other, would you be concerned about unilateral action leading to a trade war that could clearly have a big impact on our economy?
Well, the short answer is yes, of course, that's concerning for anybody and everybody. But equally, the risks and the dangers of doing nothing after the Northern Ireland elections 2 weeks ago now, which resulted in this sort of deadlocked Stormont Assembly, and the dangers to, in the long term, to the peace that's upheld by the Good Friday Agreement, are very, very serious. So we can't do nothing, but most of the options of doing something come with some pretty serious attendant risks. So I think it is definitely a high wire act for just for for us, but also for the EU as well.
Let's talk about the cost of living crisis, the immediacy of it all. We heard from Andrew Bailey yesterday talking about apocalyptic food price rises, largely due to Ukraine and food supplies, and of course the global inflation. We know the Bank of England's independent, don't we, John? But it's fair to say they should face some criticism. I mean, this idea that the war somehow was sprung upon us by complete surprise is not true. I mean, there's much talk about it from the autumn of last year, and there were many commentators saying that inflation was going to get high given all the problems about supply chains. Do you think it's right that the Bank of England governor should be criticised for the bank's poor performance in not seeing this crisis?
Well, I think you listen to, for example, some of the people on the Treasury Select Committee, the MPs who are in charge of holding the Bank of England to account. And what they're saying is that they think that some things are genuinely impossible for anybody in the UK to govern. You can't expect the Bank of England to dictate terms to Vladimir Putin about what he does in Ukraine. But there are some things particularly about our labour market here in the UK after Brexit, which perhaps could and should have been predicted, and which aren't a sort of unpredictable or temporary flash in the pan, and which perhaps the Bank of England should have spotted coming. So, I mean, it's easy to have 20/20 hindsight, isn't it? But those certainly the issue. But I think it's also fair to blame the Bank of England for all the problems we've got. There are all sorts of other things which either the government or and it isn't good enough to just depend on the Bank of England.
John, your connection's not great, but I'm going to try and persevere with one last quick question, if I can, and that is essentially, we know that there are more people now out of jobs than there are more job vacancies than people out of jobs. Frankly, it is pretty sensible, isn't it, for politicians and for others to ask people to either get second jobs or to work longer hours in order not just to help the economy, but to help them earn a bit more money during this cost of living crisis. That makes sense, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I mean, we're a free country, so people don't have to accept and do what the government says within the bounds of the law. But yes, what it does mean is there's huge opportunities there for anybody who wants to earn a bit of extra money from overtime or taking on a few more hours or whatever it might be. Those opportunities are definitely there. But there's other things that the government could be looking at as well. I mean, I asked a question in Parliament this morning saying, look, we've already cut the tax rates for the lowest paid in our society, and that's announced in both the autumn budget and then some follow-up measures in the spring statement just a couple of weeks ago. We could go even further in future. And what those sorts of moves do is they make it possible for the least well-off, the low-paid people in society to keep more of the money that they earn. And that's going to be a very big, important move for helping people cope with the cost of living, even if it's driven by things which are completely outside the UK and nobody can do anything about right here.
OK, John, as always, really appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed. John Penrose there, who's the Conservative MP for Weston-super-Mare. Apologies for the slight technical glitches during that interview. You're watching GB News. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. Lots more coming up, including, of course, the former Ukrainian President, Petro Poroshenko, live from Ukraine. See you in a couple of minutes.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
A very good afternoon. It's coming up to 3:30. You're watching GB News. Lots of you getting in touch, by the way. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Christina says, watching you and others on your programmes, I'm becoming increasingly frustrated with the banal bleating of the Northern Ireland Unionist and Nationalist parties. They complain about being the poorest part of the UK. If they join the EU, they'll be still even poorer. Why? Because they still spend lumps of their time taking each other on rather than developing their community. With their joint attitudes, this will improve. I think that would be quite a mission. And Neil says the government are incapable of sorting this cost of living crisis out. People are struggling in this country, but they do nothing. Why is Boris Johnson throwing money at Ukraine? Yes, I know there's a war on, but Boris needs to look after British people first. GB News at GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let's turn to the cost of living crisis. We've been talking about that today, haven't we? Because a charity is warning that it is taking a devastating toll on people's mental health. Figures from the charity Christians Against Poverty show that before seeking free debt help, 60% of the clients often or always felt lonely. That's up 10% since restrictions eased. Our reporter Anna Riley in Yorkshire has more on this story.
After losing his factory job during the pandemic, Graham Ashley Sr.'s finances began to spiral. He couldn't afford to pay his bills and was plunged into £13,000 of debt and forced to live off food banks. Christians Against Poverty helped Graham access relief to wipe his debt, but his lack of funds have taken a serious toll on his mental health.
I've spent a lot of time just on my own and crying. And I'm not talking, like 5 minutes, I'm talking really crying and just not knowing where to turn. And it hasn't helped with the budget food that I've been having to buy. I've piled a lot of weight on, and that's at the moment stopping me going out. I'm embarrassed by my appearance.
And now with the rising costs of living, Graham is on an even tighter budget.
The rise on the prepayment meters has meant that, I have been washing daily, but this is today is the first time in 3 weeks that I've had a shower. You have to save money on the gas. And as far as the electric goes, I've just been, if I cook a meal, I've been cooking a quantity that will do me for 3 meals, so I'm not needlessly burning electric again and again and again. And yeah.
Christians Against Poverty Debt Centre manager Louise Foster helped Graham to sort out his finances.
Well, it's a really worrying time for lots of people. I mean, debt's always been around there. I've been doing this now for 5 years, but we're seeing a big increase in people obviously affected by debt. And we've got statistics that say that 60% of people are feeling lonely because of debt, despite coming out of lockdown. So that's an increase of over 10%. There's a lot of calls coming in where the people have actually got so low they're considering and feeling suicidal. So yeah, really, really worried about obviously the real increase in fuel prices because they don't have any other means of cutting back. They've already cut back as much as they can, and there really are a lot of anxiety and not, knowing what to do and where to turn next.
Charities like Christians Against Poverty are encouraging those in debt to reach out for support with the cost of living increasing. Anna Riley, GB News, Bradford.
Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to have an interview live from Kyiv with the former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. You will not want to miss that. But first, just after 3:30, let's go back to Rosie for the latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:33. Let's get you up to date. The European Union has warned it will respond with all measures at its disposal if the UK breaks the Northern Ireland Protocol. European Commission Vice President Maros Sefcovic says practical solutions to problems have been offered, but the UK's failed to meet them halfway. The Foreign Secretary set out plans to rewrite Britain's post-Brexit trading agreement, changing the rules on how goods enter Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK. A man's been charged with multiple offences linked to the ongoing investigation into child abuse in Rotherham. Officers from the National Crime Agency's Operation Stovewood confirmed the 57-year-old is facing 17 offences linked to the abuse of 4 teenage girls in the 1990s. The founder of a far-right terror group whose members plotted to carry out deadly attacks has been found guilty of involvement with the organisation. 27-year-old Alex Davies set up the group National Action 9 years ago and continued to associate with the group and its offshoots after it was banned by the government in 2016. Boris Johnson has defended plans to give special constables powers to use tasers, saying it's the government's crucial duty to make communities safer. Amnesty International is describing the move as dangerous, saying misuse of tasers can lead to harm and even death. The Home Secretary says the measures will ensure volunteer police officers are not at a disadvantage when facing knife attackers or terror threats. The Queen's made a surprise appearance at London Paddington Station to officially open the completed Elizabeth line named in her honour. The 96-year-old monarch was joined by her youngest son, Prince Edward, who was due to board a train and head to Tottenham Court Road, making the completion of London's Crossrail project. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound is 1.25 to the dollar. The pound is 1.18 to the euro. The price of gold currently stands at £1,461.08 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back. It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Tuesday afternoon. You're watching GB News. We're on TV, online, and indeed on your wireless radio, so you may well just be listening to us. By the way, GB Views at gbnews.uk. Do always get in touch. We'll get to some of those before the end of the programme. But let's now turn to Ukraine, because more than 260 soldiers, many of them wounded, have been evacuated from the besieged steel plant in the southern city of Mariupol, appearing to cede control of the city to Russia after 82 days of bombardment. The General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces said the soldiers defending the plant had performed their combat task, and their main goal now was to save the lives of the personnel. It comes as Turkey has threatened to block Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO, which would be, of course, a boost to Russia. Well, delighted to say, joining me now is the former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko. Mr. Poroshenko, thank you so much indeed for joining us here on GB News. First of all, let's talk about those very brave soldiers in Mariupol who've held out for 82 days. There must be, in some ways, a sense of relief that the wounded now are finally able to get out.
Thank you very much indeed for such words for our brave soldiers. And Mariupol soldiers start to be a symbol of Ukrainian resilience. The time when Putin expected that within 36 hours, Putin troops will be on the Krещатик, on the main street of Kiev. And when our battalion, together with the thousands and thousands of Kievites and all Ukrainians, stopped Putin troops. And I'm proud that armed forces, which was created by me as a Supreme Commander-in-Chief since year 2014, demonstrate to the whole world that Ukraine has one of the strongest army in Europe. Because of what? Because we have a best motivation. We fighting for our soul. We fighting for our children and women. We fighting for our future. And Putin soldiers has absolutely no motivation. With this situation in Mariupol, 82 days without food, without water, melting the snow to reach the water to drink, without ammunition. They tied more than 2 divisions, more than 20,000 Russian troops saving Ukraine. And I want to, first of all, appreciate and thanks for General Secretary of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, for President of ICRC, Peter Maurer, for President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and for Ukrainian armed forces who help us to organize this evacuation.
Incredible.
I know they continue this evacuation, and it would be significantly more Ukrainian soldiers, and now we should concentrate our efforts to return them back home. This is our main task now. And I call to the whole world to be shoulder to shoulder with us to save these heroic people.
Do you think there will be a prisoner swap with Russia?
This is what Ukrainian authorities declared today. But I have a very negative experience for negotiation with Putin. And I have two recommendations. Recommendation number one, don't trust Putin. Putin never keeps his word. But recommendation number two, don't be afraid of Putin. And this is what Ukrainians demonstrate. Definitely would be initiated the three most important things now. Point number one, and this is the point for the peace negotiation, that would be the complete ceasefire without any precondition. Point number two, withdrawal of the troops of Russia as a country aggressor. And point number three, releasing all the hostages from Ukrainian side, from Russian side, and provide the whole humanitarian mission to saving civilians. Because millions of civilians now, because of the Russian aggression, suffered from this disastrous war.
Are you not concerned, though, that now that Mariupol has essentially fallen to the Russians, that they've got this land corridor from Crimea to the Russian border, and that they're going to try and hold on to that they're not going to give up that land corridor very easily? Are you concerned, despite the efforts of those brave troops?
I'm concerned about every single square meter of Ukrainian land. And I can assure you, Ukraine never give up. And we do not have any compromise on the subject of the territorial integrity. This is not possible. And all Ukrainian land, including Crimea, including Donbass, including Kherson, we will definitely liberate. Exactly like I, as the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces in the year 2014, make Mariupol free, together like 2/3 occupied Donbass. We do that in the year 2014. We will do that the same now.
Your sense is, and you're right, you were president at the time, this war is not just a couple of months old, it is 8-9 years old. Do you think Ukraine will now not settle? Ukrainian victory means pushing the Russians out of not just the Donbass region, but maybe even Crimea too?
Please remove even. Donbass, definitely. Crimea, definitely. And point number three, deputinize Russia. Deputinize Europe and deputinize world. Because if we do not do that, in 1 year or 2 years' time, Putin can knock at the door of any neighboring countries, or maybe not neighboring. Now Putin is complete unpredictable. And I want that, first of all, I want to appreciate, using this opportunity, all the British people for enormous solidarity with us. British Parliament, partisan support for Ukraine, British government, and my good friend and great friend of Ukraine, your Prime Minister Boris Johnson. You're playing a crucial role now, supplying us the weapons. And that was an answer on my letter, which I sent to Boris Johnson. And I received an answer. Not only I received the letter in response, but not only by that, but with the British howitzer, with the British anti-aircraft missiles, with the British weapons, and with the British financial support. This is exactly position friend in need. Is a friend indeed. Thank you.
And we really appreciate those words. Thank you, Mr. Poroshenko. Just very finally, before I let you go, you talked about President Erdogan of Turkey earlier. I don't know whether you talked to him or have the ability to do so, but do you think he should allow Sweden and Finland to join NATO. He suggested he might veto it. Do you think that the Turks should allow Sweden and Finland into NATO?
Unfortunately, the aggression against Ukraine demonstrates the ruins of the all post-war security system based on Security Council of United Nations. And in the world, there is not remain any effective security mechanism but NATO. I just want to remind you, when Ukraine giving up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world in the beginning of the 90s, we received the security guarantee in form of the Budapest Memorandum. Great Britain was one of the countries guarantor, but this is worth the paper. And with that situation, I think that the President Erdogan is definitely interested in the secure Europe. But I think the future membership of the Finland and Sweden, this is definitely not enough for security. It would be no security if Ukraine will not be also NATO member state. That's why in June, in summit of NATO in Madrid, we definitely should receive membership action plan for NATO for Ukraine.
Petro Poroshenko, thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your time this afternoon on GB News. That's Petro Poroshenko, the former president of Ukraine. Thank you indeed. Let's turn now to the government's counter-terrorism programme, because it's been apparently too focused on right-wing extremism and should now crack down on Islamic extremism. That's according to a leaked draft extract from a landmark review of the Prevent strategy. Well, joining me now is the Chief Executive of the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Alan, were you surprised by this leaked draft?
Well, I was surprised the draft was leaked, of course, because we shouldn't be getting leaks of such a nature. It seems obvious that somebody who didn't like the report's conclusions decided to leak it. But I'm not surprised by the content of this, because it's something that we've been saying and has been borne out by the data for some time, that there's been this sort of focus on far-right extremism, which is, of course, a problem, which is, of course, something we want to be tackling, but isn't, in the data at least, borne out as the major threat to British security, which is, of course, radical Islam. And so, from that perspective, the report's findings appear to be bang on with what the data actually suggests.
And why do you think that is? Why this focus on right-wing extremism, potentially at the disadvantage of focusing on Islamic extremism?
Well, it's a complicated story. There's a number of reasons for why this has been the case. The first is that it's much easier to gain support all round against the far right than it is against radical Islam, because, of course, everyone agrees the far right is the threat, whereas some people are confused about what the threat from radical Islam is. The reality is that both are severe security threats to this country, but in terms of sheer numbers, it is, radical Islam that is the biggest factor. Now, on top of that, of course, you then get some, kind of soft peddling from some people, which is a conscious desire to, if you like, damp down the issue of radical Islam in favour of the far right, because that is a narrative they just want to talk about. They're not interested in the second narrative. It doesn't fit their broader politically correct motivations. I think when it comes, though, to these sorts of threats, we need to be national security minded first. Forget the political correctness, forget the jargon. We need to look at what the threat to this country is, and we need to address it according to what that threat provides for.
Just very quickly, Alan, if you can, just a little tight for time. I mean, is the Prevent strategy, though, in your words, whether it's dealing with Islamic extremism or right-wing extremism, is it working, frankly?
Well, it needs to be much better than what it is. The very fact that over the past few years we've had several terrorists, for example, who've been through Prevent in various ways, have been known to authorities and haven't delivered, that tells you there's a problem. What this shows is we've got to have a much better pickup by the security services when it comes to addressing the threats.
OK. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Alan Mendoza there, joining us from the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you much indeed, Alan. Now, the founder of a far-right terror group whose members plotted to carry out deadly attacks has been found guilty of involvement with the organisation. 27-year-old Alex Davis set up the National Action 9 years ago and continued to associate with the group and its offshoot organisations after it was banned by the government in 2016. This report is from our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White.
Deep in this woodland in Wiltshire, these far-right extremists are seen training for the race war they were determined to spark. Members of the banned terror group National Action, who continue to meet, plot and spread their hateful ideology long after the group was outlawed by the government. Walking past the camera is the group's founder, Alex Davis, about to start boxing with another young extremist who went on to join the police. Davis was still a teenager when he set up National Action in 2013, focusing his attentions on recruiting the young and the impressionable.
Turn away, Alex.
Within a few short years, the group had reached national prominence, staging sometimes violent protests in support of a neo-Nazi ideology. They specifically targeted university campuses and town centres, like here in Bath, where Alex Davis got more than he bargained for when he was confronted by an angry mother.
My daughter's mixed race. Come on. Should she be booted out?
I don't know. She looks white to me.
She is not. She is mixed race.
Now Davis has been found guilty of continued association with National Action and various offshoot organisations set up to try to circumvent a government ban after the group was outlawed in 2016. It is the culmination of a multi-year investigation by counter-terrorism detectives.
Alex Davis held these views, these abhorrent views of a race war, of white supremacy, of harking back to Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s, things that most right-minded people in this country find completely against everything they stand for.
In total, 19 people have now been convicted for their membership of National Action, including Alice Cutter, whose adoration of the Nazis was so profound she even entered a Miss Hitler beauty pageant and spoke of gassing synagogues. Her boyfriend, Mark Jones, was jailed for 5.5 years for his involvement in the group. And Metropolitan Police Officer Ben Hannum, who posted this picture of himself with a Hitler moustache to fellow extremists.
No, it's my design. I got like a torch.
Even as he applied to join the police, he was still meeting regularly with the group, training, posting flyers and spray painting their logo on buildings. The organisation also recruited members of the military, like Mikko Vehviläinen, a Lance Corporal with the Royal Anglian Regiment, jailed for 8 years. Jack Renshaw was jailed for life for a plot to murder the Labour MP Rosie Cooper. And Jack Coulson, who was just 17 when he was convicted of constructing a pipe bomb.
Those individuals within National Action were incredibly dangerous. And the ideology they espoused was an ideology of hatred, which caused division in communities across the country.
A common factor with almost all of Alex Davis's National Action recruits was their youth, either in their teens or early 20s.
He very much had worked out how to target the propaganda element of the recruiting process at young people and how to make the most of the internet and how to make the most of memes to spread that message and also to take that message out into the communities he was aiming at.
Hey, right, who's going to volunteer go first?
Almost a decade after National Action was formed, founder Alex Davis and many of its members are now behind bars. Islamist extremism is still by far the most potent threat the country faces. But authorities say far-right extremism remains a key and growing concern. Mark White, GB News.
OK, that is it from me for today. I'm back, of course, at 3 p.m. tomorrow here with the briefing on GB News. Up next, it's Colin Brazier, 4 to 6. Stay tuned for that. First, here's the Met Office and the weather.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. There's warm sunshine in the forecast, but also heavy showers and thunderstorms. It must be almost summer. Here's the bigger picture. You can see a swirl of cloud on the satellite image, an area of low pressure that's kind of hanging out here and allowing warmer air to waft up from the south, but introducing the moisture with these weather fronts, and that combination of moisture and warmth will trigger some heavy downpours. Mostly across western areas this evening. Torrential rain possible, particularly western Scotland, Northern Ireland, but also a few flashes of lightning possible across East Anglia and the southeast as some heavy showers move through. But they are zipping through, so Most places actually dry from midnight onwards. We'll keep some showers going in the northwest and temperatures mostly holding up in double figures. On to Wednesday, and for most places, it's going to be a fine day. Yes, some showers, certainly early on over western and northern parts of Scotland, maybe the odd one early doors for Northern Ireland. But generally, Northern Ireland, a much brighter, much sunnier day compared to today. And for most places, it's a fine, bright day with lengthy spells of hazy sunshine. Not quite as warm as today, but still pleasant enough. Temperatures into the high teens, low 20s, maybe 24 across the southeast. Cooler around some coasts. And then we see the potential for further showers coming into the southwest initially, band of heavy rain moving into Northern Ireland, and then further south, a risk of some pretty lively looking storms drifting up from France.